When the HOA of my quiet San Diego neighborhood sent fake police officers to intimidate me, it felt like my entire world had turned against me. Margaret Maggie Holloway, obsessed with control, weaponized fear to assert her authority over every resident. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just a neighbor. I was James Harper, sheriff of Harbor County, and I had the law on my side. And just wait until you see how this confrontation exploded into a shocking twist, and why justice in the end finally prevailed. I had always taken pride in living a calm, measured life in my San Diego suburb. My days were structured, predictable, and comfortable. I valued peace, good relationships with neighbors, and the quiet satisfaction of following the rules. Home was my sanctuary, a place where I could relax after long hours serving the community. That sense of safety, of normalcy, was something I had worked for and cherished deeply. But everything changed when the new HOA president, Margaret Maggie Holloway, moved into a position of authority. Almost immediately, it became clear that Maggie didn't view her role as a way to maintain fairness or community standards. She saw it as a tool for control. At first, the changes were subtle, almost laughable in their pettiness. A chair on my porch was too close to the walkway. My garden gnomes were inappropriate. The curtains in my living room were the wrong color. I followed the rules to the letter, but Maggie seemed to delight in finding new ways to make my life uncomfortable. Each letter she sent, each complaint she filed, carried a tone of judgment that was impossible to ignore. There was no genuine concern for community aesthetics or safety. It was personal. The more I tried to comply, the more she found to criticize. It felt as if I were being watched constantly, every choice scrutinized under her unyielding gaze. Then one afternoon, everything escalated beyond absurdity. Two men appeared at my front door wearing what looked like police uniforms. Their presence was intimidating. The authoritative posture, the badges, the clipped tone in which they demanded my documents made my heart race. I opened the door, confused and wary, and asked what this was about. Their reply was vague, referencing some alleged HOA violation, but the way they spoke left no room for negotiation or explanation. At that moment, a chilling realization washed over me. This wasn't about rules or compliance. This was a targeted, deliberate act designed to intimidate me, to make me feel powerless in the place I called home. Anger boiled inside me. I had always respected authority and expected others to do the same, but this was a perversion of the system. They weren't legitimate officers enforcing the law. They were instruments of Maggie's obsession with control. The shock of seeing these strangers at my door, the sense of intrusion into my private life, it all collided into a singular, searing emotion. Rage. Who were they to treat my home like a stage for their intimidation? Who gave them the right to impose fear on me and my family? As I stood there, face to face with what I initially thought were law enforcement officers, a mix of disbelief and fury coursed through me. I clenched my fists, forced myself to breathe, and tried to process the audacity of it all. It wasn't just harassment, it was a violation of every boundary I had set to protect my home, my family, and my peace of mind. This anger wasn't fleeting. It anchored itself deep, demanding acknowledgement and a response. In that moment, I knew that the calm life I had built was no longer mine to take for granted. Something had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same until justice was restored. I stood in my living room, still processing the events at the front door. The initial shock had faded slightly. replaced by a heavy, gnawing weight in my chest. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. The HOA hadn't called the police. They had hired a private security company, people pretending to be officers, to intimidate me, to make me feel small and powerless. The realization cut deeper than any confrontation I had ever faced. These were not rules, not regulations. They were threats dressed as authority. The very people entrusted with fostering a sense of community had become instruments of fear, and the betrayal stung more than I could have imagined. I looked around my home, the place that had always been my sanctuary, and felt a pang of helplessness. My family, who had relied on me to provide safety and stability, looked shaken. My wife, Emily, tried to smile and assure me that everything was fine, but the tension in her voice betrayed her fear. My children clung to her side, eyes wide with confusion, wondering why strangers had shown up at our door in uniforms that weren't real. The house that once felt secure now seemed to shrink around us, walls closing in with every whispered complaint Maggie sent, every letter she mailed claiming yet another violation. Neighbors, too, seemed to sense the shift in the air. Where there had once been casual waves and friendly conversations, now there were hushed murmurs and sideways glances. Some avoided eye contact altogether, as if being associated with me could somehow bring the same harassment upon them. I felt an acute, almost physical loneliness. It was as if the entire community, my own neighborhood, had turned into a silent jury, observing my distress without intervening. I had always believed in the goodness of people, in the idea that a neighborhood should be a support system, but this moment challenged that belief. Maggie, for her part, appeared to revel in every consequence of her actions. Every letter, every complaint, every intimidation tactic seemed to carry a perverse satisfaction for her. I could almost sense her smirk in the tone of her emails and the sharpness of her words. It was infuriating, and yet even that anger was tinged with a deeper pain. The realization that someone could wield power with so little regard for fairness or humanity. The injustice weighed on me like a physical burden, pressing down on my shoulders, making even small tasks feel monumental. I felt the sting of betrayal, not just from Maggie, but from a system that should have protected residents, not manipulated them for personal gratification. For a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed as though the forces aligned against me were insurmountable. It was a heavy, suffocating sensation, the kind that makes you question not just the world around you, but your place in it. Yet even in that pain, I recognized something essential. This wasn't just about fear. It was a test of resilience. The weight of injustice may have pressed down on me, but it also sparked something within. A quiet determination that the truth could not remain hidden, that the people trying to break me would soon learn that their power had limits. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but in the depths of this pain, the first flickers of resolve began to glow. It hit me like a sudden flash of clarity. I wasn't just a frustrated resident being harassed by an overzealous HOA. I was James Harper, sheriff of Harbor County. Years of service had honed my instincts, trained me to read situations, and prepared me to act decisively when others couldn't. The tools of justice weren't just abstract concepts. They were real, tangible skills and authority I could wield to protect my home, my family, and my community. That realization shifted something inside me. What had felt like helplessness and fear only moments before now felt like a call to action, a chance to confront this injustice head on. I took a deep breath and began mapping out a plan. There was no room for rash moves. Precision was critical. I contacted headquarters, explained the situation, and coordinated discreetly to ensure every legal step I took would be airtight. I knew that the HOA's intimidation tactics were not only petty, they were illegal. They had overstepped boundaries, misused authority, and weaponized fear. I reminded myself that I had faced high-pressure situations before, and that experience would guide me now. The difference this time was deeply personal. It wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about reclaiming a sense of security that had been stolen from me. Days later, when the so-called officers showed up at my door again, my heart rate quickened, but I forced myself to remain calm. I straightened my posture, smoothed my shirt, and walked to the door with measured steps. There was a rhythm to confidence, a way of moving and speaking that communicates control even before a single word is said. I opened the door, and there they stood, the same uniformed figures meant to intimidate, their badges gleaming faintly in the afternoon sun. I smiled, a calm but firm expression and that masked the anticipation coursing through me. "Good afternoon, officers," I said evenly, letting the authority in my voice carry weight. "I'm James Harper, Sheriff of Harbor County. You do realize such actions can lead to your arrest." For a brief moment, time seemed to stretch. The boldness of my words, backed by years of experience and the undeniable truth, created an almost tangible tension in the air. Their faces, carefully trained to appear authoritative, betrayed the slightest flicker of shock. For a moment, the intimidation they had aimed at me faltered, replaced by uncertainty and fear of the law they had dared to misrepresent. Hope surged in my chest. It wasn't just a fleeting, fragile hope. It was the solid, grounded certainty that justice could prevail. The imbalance of power had shifted, and the scales were beginning to tip. I realized then that fear could be confronted with authority, and cruelty could be met with preparation and resolve. I wasn't merely waiting for vindication, I was stepping into it, fully aware of my capabilities and my rights. At that moment, my family, who had been watching from behind the window, caught sight of my calm demeanor. I could see the tension in their shoulders ease, the flicker of relief in their eyes. This wasn't just about stopping Maggie and her fake officers. It was about reclaiming the peace and safety that had been stolen from our lives. And in that shared glance, I felt the first true spark of triumph, knowing that the long, tense battle was finally turning toward justice. The moment I had been preparing for finally arrived. All the members of the HOA who had orchestrated this intimidation scheme were taken into custody, facing charges of impersonation and misconduct. The relief that washed over me was unlike anything I had felt in years. It wasn't just a professional victory. It was deeply personal. Every unjust act, every fear-filled day, every whispered conversation that had made my family feel unsafe now found its resolution. Maggie Holloway, the woman who had wielded her position like a weapon, tried to twist the narrative, to deny the truth that had been so glaringly obvious. But even her practiced cunning and manipulations could not withstand the clarity and authority of the law. As I watched the HOA members escorted away, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a calm but electric affirmation that justice had been restored. My home, once a site of fear and tension, now felt expansive and peaceful again. The windows I had feared looking through were now portals to freedom rather than suspicion. I could see my family smiling, finally relaxed, their shoulders no longer tight with anxiety. My children ran through the yard, their laughter reclaiming the spaces that had felt shadowed by intimidation. My wife, Emily, reached for my hand and squeezed it firmly, a silent acknowledgement of the ordeal we had endured and the relief we now shared. The story of what had transpired isn't just about confrontation. It's about the power of knowledge, preparation, and steadfast principles. Years of training, experience, and commitment to upholding the law gave me the tools to face an injustice that could have left me feeling powerless. I realized then that courage doesn't come from recklessness, nor does strength come from confrontation alone. It comes from understanding your rights, acting with precision, and maintaining your integrity even when others attempt to erode it. Every step of this struggle had been a test of resolve, and every challenge only reinforced the principle that the truth, when wielded wisely, becomes an unassailable force. It also became clear that fear can only maintain control when met with silence. By standing firm, by refusing to be intimidated, and by using the authority and knowledge I had earned over a lifetime of service, I had not only protected my family, but also reminded the community that accountability cannot be ignored. Maggie's attempt to dominate through coercion had been dismantled not with anger or vengeance, but with lawful certainty and moral clarity. As the dust settled and normalcy returned, a sense of inspiration filled me. This story is a testament to the idea that no matter how overwhelming an unjust system may seem, courage and understanding can tip the balance. Those who attempt to wield power through fear may believe they are untouchable, but the law, fairness, and truth always have their defenders. And when justice is applied wisely and persistently, it restores not only what was taken, but also faith in the principles that hold communities together. That day, as I closed the door behind the last officer and looked around my home, I felt a quiet, enduring triumph. Justice had prevailed, my family was safe, and the lesson was clear. Integrity, knowledge, and steadfast resolve are the most powerful shields against oppression. In the face of fear, courage will always find its path, and truth will always have its champion.